Okay, people. So I am joined today by TJ Noel Sullivan. TJ, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And congratulations on the new film.
Thank
Right?
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Midas is your feature directorial debut, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yeah.
How's that feel, man?
It's been great. I mean, I think this is actually the first podcast I've done since we actually released it. And so getting to hear people's feedback has been really cool. You spend so much time on a film where you're getting told from people like people working on it, oh, we love it, it's great. And then you get feedback from, the rough cuts, but that's typically family and friends and people that, And so to have it actually out into the world and seeing, social media interactions with people who have absolutely no connection to the film, but just found it through whatever and enjoyed it. I think that's been really, really cool. And also, as a filmmaker, that's why you make films, right? Is to release them into
Mm,
the world and to have an impact on an audience more than just the people that you might talk to on an everyday basis. And so that's been really enjoyable.
mm. Yeah, no. Entertainment Squad hit me up about it. So I was just like, yeah, let me give it a look. But you never know what you're getting into with these things, right? You never know like how good is a film gonna be, what I don't read synopsises or watch trailers, so I never really know what I'm getting into. So it's always a very nice surprise when you're like, oh, this is this is very good. And then when you see it someone's directorial debut, that's always an interesting one, right? Because there's always different approaches, but it's coming into something with a level of proficiency, that slickness that you oftentimes don't see until a few films in. So that was the big thing with Midas. It was just like, this is really fucking well put together. This is real slick.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's two pieces to that for me. Number one, it's my feature debut, but I always say I got to my feature debut by doing 30 plus shorts. All right. And I think that is such a big piece for filmmakers to be able to cut their teeth on short films. And so with each one, I was trying to figure out, okay, what am I really focusing on? Let me, on my last one, pacing was a really big thing. And I wanted to, find pacing and find scenes that had tight edits and scenes that had dramatic and how to weave those types of scenes together into a full-fledged narrative. Um, and so I think that is one of the things that I'm glad to hear that for you that came together on Midas. And that was one of the things I really wanted to have happen was it's a heist film. And so we need to be brought into this heist world and these fun heist sequences. Well, also there's some heart to it and there needs to be, it can't just all be icing on the cake and slick scenes. And so that was, I think, one of the things. And then also prep. And, me and my cinematographer, Mike Curry, who is, so much of this film, the credit goes to him. We sat in his apartment for a week straight and just all of those fun heist sequences we mapped out. We had a whiteboard, we had computers, we had all sorts of things. We said, okay, how is this going to play out? How are we going to do this in a way that's really exciting and both gives a nod to some of the great heist films that were inspirations for us, while also trying to do something a little bit different and set our own tone. And so that was all that preparation. Then when we get on set, it's much easier. You're not trying in the moment to picture everything. You're like, okay, I've done a lot of the work ahead of time. I know how this is going to play out.
Yeah, no, that will make sense. I mean, TJ, you're a young cat. So what were your kind of inspirations? What were the films that you grew up with? Because I imagine we might have different reference points.
Yeah, the film that I absolutely grew up with and that was the biggest inspiration here was Ocean's 11, the Soderbergh version. Um,
Okay.
and that was a film that in my household growing up, anytime it was on, my dad was one of those guys that flips channels, and that's a movie. Anytime Ocean's 11's on, we stop at that channel, and wherever we are in the film, we finish it out. And so that was
Oh
definitely
shit, you can do that?
Yeah,
Oh man, if like there's times, and there might be a film on that I really I love that film, and I haven't seen it ages. Even if like only 5 minutes, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, I'm like, I can't. It's started. I can't watch it now. Like I need to, I need to go from the very beginning.
yeah. I refuse to do that with films I haven't seen. For films I haven't seen, I'm like, I got to start from the beginning. But I think films that especially films that I know well, like Ocean's 11 is one of those scenes, one of those movies now that like I can pick up at almost any point and be like, yep, I know exactly where we are in the movie, where we're going, all that. And I honestly, I think one of the things that allows me to do is to just focus on the craft a little bit more, because I'm getting, okay, we're plopping into this sequence. What are we just seeing from the camera work here? Actually, one of my favorite exercises that sometimes I do purposely, sometimes I do accidentally, is watching a movie on mute and seeing, some of the great directors, and I think Soderbergh is one of them. The whole movie is communicated in silence, even though
Mm,
the dialogue is so well written and so important, just by watching facial expressions and the way the film is shot and camera angles, you get a sense of exactly what's happening in the film. And so, yeah, I absolutely, I will never start a movie midway through, like for the first time I've ever seen it. But once I know a movie well, I'm happy to kind of take different opportunities to see it in a different light.
right, right. Now, there's two things you said which I think are interesting. Firstly, uh, that being an inspiration, I am very grateful you didn't try and duplicate the John Cheadle character, because that accent was just so bad. That was so bad. But then the other thing, and it's something that I appreciated as well with Midas, was there was no mood music. And I hate mood music. And I think what you said about watching a film in silence and being able to get what's happening from the body language and what you're seeing on screen, I think that's always very important. And I think sometimes people get a bit lazy and they're like, I'm not sure they're gonna get that this is sad. Let's put some sad music here. Or, oh, let's throw some happy music. And it's just like, you should be able to have that on mute and know what the fuck that scene is. So
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
thank you. Yeah, that's something that I'm very grateful for my composer, Isabel, who it was the first time I had worked with her. And working with a new composer is definitely a process. You kind of like feel each other out, and there's kind of learning to speak on the same page that goes in like the first couple weeks. I remember, we'd go trade back and forth in notes, and sometimes we'd have to say, you know what, let's just like get on a Zoom,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna watch you work live, because like it's hard for me to articulate based off what's getting sent back. But one of the things that I really appreciated with Isabel was I sent her the full film with some temp music in. We had temp music for most of the heist scenes and all the scenes that needs to kind of be cut to pace.
Mm.
Um, and then I had a couple other scenes where I was like, I think this scene could use music potentially. In the rough cut, it doesn't have any music, but like I think the scene could potentially have music. And I think for most composers, if you gave them that option, they would say, "Oh, like give me the option to write more music and do more, like put more of my fingerprint on this film. I'm going to take that opportunity." And Isabel came back to me on 3 or 4 scenes and said, "I think this scene works better without music." And it was those scenes that we could have put in some mood music, and it was really her as the composer saying, "You know what? I don't even want to try it, because I think that the scene works better in silence." And I think that was, speaks volumes to her as a composer, but was really helpful for me, especially doing my first feature where there's so much more time to be filled. And so you're like, okay, I know on a short what needs music and what doesn't need
Yeah.
music, but on a feature, it's kind of a new ball game to wrap your head around. And so that was really helpful, and kind of helped narrow us in on exactly where we should have music and where we shouldn't.
Yeah. No, I think that was really a great move from her, because there's a lot of times where people are just like, oh, this gives me more things to do, right? They're, oh, I can show off doing this. And so they'll, even though they might have a feeling this isn't really needed, they will put it there. So the fact that she didn't, yeah, that speaks volumes, definitely. Yeah, when you look at films, were there any particular soundtracks that you were just like, oh, if we could, you know what I mean, get anywhere close to that, I'd be happy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think our baseline for our starting point in the conversation was the Ocean's films, both Ocean's 11, but then also Ocean's 8, which has a nice soundtrack. And I think actually a number of our temp music pieces were from Ocean's 8.
Right.
But we kind of started there and said, this is what a heist film's soundtrack sounds like. But then from there, we knew, we wanted to go pretty different in that, it's set in the city of Hartford. Born and raised here. And I was like, the music here should be hip hop. It should have a beat to it. It kind of should have a much different feel to it. And so it was kind of interesting to take that core essence of like, what is music for a heist scene? And then, I think the musical references were artists like J. Cole and Kendrick and Kanye West. It was kind of mixing all of those together and trying to say, all right, how do we take the essence of what the Ocean's 11 and the Ocean's 8 soundtracks are, but bring them to this world? And it was a lot of fun to do that. And again, it was something that we were constantly going back and forth on and trying to figure out. And one of the things that was really cool was getting to collaborate with Annoyed, who does the vocals for the opening track.
Okay.
In that opening montage, he's a artist that was raised here in Hartford, and now has kind of reached bigger heights and is touring around the country. And makes a cameo. He's the guy in the opening scene that is picking up the food delivery on his front porch.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and we had kind of like, I had a friend of a friend who I reached out to as we were shooting. So I kind of had this idea as we were shooting, and I said, hey, is he around? Would he be interested? Like, we need 2 hours of his time to make this quick cameo. Would he be interested? And he happened to be around that day, and so he was willing to come out and do it, and it was a pleasure. And as we were on set talking, I was like, by the way, like, would you maybe be interested in doing, the vocals for the opening track? And he was like, yeah, I'd be interested, but like, I kind of want to learn more about it. And so 6 months later, I came back to him with a rough cut of the movie and said, hey, here's the movie, and here's where I think your song could come in. And he watched it that night and came back and was like, I have an idea. I want to start going on it. And so connected him and Isabel. And that was also kind of a different experience of how to work with a vocalist and a songwriter, a really accomplished rapper in his own right. But then trying to fit that within this film and what this film needs to be, and also an existing score. It was a fun puzzle piece to put together. But I think it kind of worked and makes the movie stronger, that, because we could have opened with, some other piece of licensed music. But for me, opening with an artist who was writing specifically to the movie and knew where it was going to go, I think that made it a stronger opening track.
Yeah, no, I think when you have films that do that, it always feels different, right? And then I think having someone from the area, you know what I mean, like that just seems fitting.
Yeah,
That seems right. Uh-huh. Right. So with this film, like, where did the idea come from? And why was this the one to be the feature directorial debut?
it's a good question. I really had the very first idea for this way back in 2018. While I was still in college, and I took a screenwriting class, and this was my final project for the class. Was I mapped out and wrote, I think, like 30 pages of a feature film that was a heist film, where at the time they were seniors in college, and they decided to rob a tech company called Midas.
Right.
And pause here if for spoilers, but there's this twist that takes place 2/3 of the way through the movie where they uncover that the company has kind of this nefarious plot underneath, and then the last third of the movie is really all about that. And so I had that idea for a heist movie where the first 2/3 of the movie feels just like your regular heist movie, and they uncover something about the company that they're robbing, and it takes a twist. And so I had that idea, and then went back, 2 years later, was kicking around during COVID, November 2020, had a lot of free time on my hands, and was like, okay, what could my first feature be? And came back to that idea and was like, this is a good idea, but I don't know if this works quite right. And I was talking to a mentor of mine who was asking me some questions. Like, I have this idea for a movie, and I think I could shoot it in Hartford, my hometown, and I think that would work well. And he was like, well, why is it set in Hartford? And I was like, I just told you, I think it's my hometown, and I'll get a lot of community support. And he's like, no, that's why you're going to shoot it there, but you still haven't told me why it's going to be set there. And that was the light bulb moment, because Hartford is the health insurance capital of the world. We have some of the largest health insurance companies headquartered here. And it's I think it's like 40% of, or something like that. There's a huge percentage of the population that are employed by some of these big health insurance companies. And so that was this light bulb moment for me of like, oh yeah, if it's set in Hartford, they're not robbing a tech company, which was the original version of the script, was Midas tech company that was supposed to be a Facebook, Twitter-esque company.
Right.
That wouldn't be the target. If it's set in Hartford, they're robbing a health insurance company. And it all kind of fell into place from there of, okay, well, if they're robbing a health insurance company, the motive is his mom was denied coverage, and it all kind of clicked for me. And then once I got that momentum, I'm a big believer in follow your passions and follow what you're excited about. And so I had this momentum going. I was really excited about the project. I was telling people about it, and they were excited about it too. And I was kind of like, okay, this feels very doable, because it's written in my hometown, because there's favors I can call in, and it's an action. There's action scenes and there's excitement to it, but it's not these huge stunts. We don't need to blow up a car. We don't need to scale the side of a building. It feels doable. So all those conditions came together of my excitement combined with the actual, opportunity and the financing to be able to do it. That clicked, and I was like, okay, let's do this.
Right. And so those other changes to the script, like they're no longer in high school, they've graduated, like those things, like when did you decide actually it will probably work better if we do this?
Yeah, I think a lot of those came in the revision periods. So I wrote the first draft of the script way back in November 2020, and then there was almost a year and a half worth of revisions. And actually during that time, I got a job with Mattel Films out in LA. And so I was out there working on really cool projects, Barbie, Hot Wheels, got to work on some cool projects and meet some really, really cool people. And always when I could would mention, hey, I had this script that I want to shoot, and would you be willing to read it and give me your feedback? And a lot of that came from, various people be like, oh, it feels just a little bit too unrealistic that they're in college still. I'm like, okay. And my big rule when screenwriting is, when you get a note, don't immediately dismiss it. Always just say, ask questions, make sure you fully understand the note, and then sleep on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'd sleep on it, and I would, in thinking about it, I'd spend, when I sleep on it, I'm often like, okay, how would I do this? So if I implemented the note, how would I do it? And a lot of times I would go, okay, I have an idea for how I would do it. And so the next day I would write that version of it. And then I'd give it a couple days, and I'd go back and I'd read the new version of it. And I'd say maybe 50% of the time I go, no, I don't. I prefer the original version of things. But at least I wrote it out and I saw how it might work. Or I'd write it out and go, oh, no, actually, this works really well. And oftentimes, we talk about the note within the note. Oftentimes, maybe it wasn't what they outwardly diagnose, but they unlocked something better, something, oh yeah,
Yes.
this isn't working. And so by trying to fix this other thing that you asked me to try and fix, I unlocked this other piece that I didn't realize I needed to fix, but now is so much better.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? Like in meetings and things like that, I always tell people, you know what I mean? There's never a wrong question, because even if you ask something that doesn't actually work, right? You propose something and you're just like, no, we can't do that because of this, right? Just the notion of talking about the thing can then spark a better idea and lead you in a better direction. So I think it's always, an interesting thing when you're going over work, you're going over a project, and other people have made comments and notes, and you're just looking to, oh, should I change that? Because you can find a really interesting direction to take things.
Yeah. One of the fun things I got to do this summer is there's a filmmaking program here in Hartford, which is actually where I got my start in filmmaking. It's for high school students, and you spend 6 weeks watching a lot of movies and making your own short film. And so I did the program 9 years ago, and this year I got invited back to be one of the instructors for the program.
Ah,
Uh,
nice.
and so that was a cool full circle moment. But one of the things was, as students were writing their very first short film scripts, I was a big in terms of giving them feedback. I, as much as I could, would try and ask them questions. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say, I think that's the wrong decision for your character. I'd say, why is your character making that decision? Because at the end of the day, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, it's all about making decisions. And so I think asking people questions of their work, they should be able to answer the questions, right? Like, you might not
Mm,
like their answer. You might not agree with, oh, the character would choose the girlfriend over her dad because of this reason, right? You might not agree with that reasoning, but the filmmaker should be able to give you a reason. Uh,
yes.
and that's, I think, it's an ongoing skill, and part of becoming a better storyteller is being able to hone in on those reasons and make those decisions better. But I think the starting point is always being able to make the decision. So when someone gives me a note or when someone asks me a question, I always am like, let me at least take it in and make a real decision off of it, as opposed to just brushing it aside.
Mm. Yeah. No, I think it makes sense, right? It definitely, and also, talking to different people about stuff, right? Some people, right, it, they'll like things more than other people, but just because they don't like it doesn't mean it's bad, right? It just means it's not for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like the Barbie movie. So many people love the Barbie movie. I didn't love it, but it's like the Harry Potter books. Don't love them, but if anything can bring people into literature, right? If these things can get kids jazzed about reading, awesome. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna be like ban them, burn them. You know what I mean? Like if people can take enjoyment out of something, that's huge. And just because it doesn't work for you doesn't mean it's not gonna work for other people.
yeah. I really like that, it didn't work for me line, because actually I think Paul Thomas Anderson is the one that has really spread this the most. I heard in a podcast that he tells people this, of never say that you hated a movie. If you make movies, you understand how difficult it is to make a
Yeah.
movie. But at the bare minimum, you need to have respect for the amount of time, the number of people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making something. And it wasn't for you, maybe didn't bring you joy, didn't click for you for whatever reason. But I once I've heard that, I've really tried to refrain from ever saying, I hated a movie, or the movie was horrible. It's The movie wasn't for
Mm.
me, but for some people it was. And I think, honestly, as I've gotten older, I've really seen that, of I fell in love with movies in high school, me and my friends on the basketball team, we would finish practice on a Friday and we would get in the car and drive to the movie theater down the street. And we would just go see whatever blockbuster, happened to be on that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Transformers 6, whatever it was. We didn't go to see a specific movie. We're just like, we're going to go to the movies. It's Friday night. What's on? Let's go buy a ticket. And so we had, 10 years ago, we had identical movie tastes and we watched the same movies. And, I think about it now, sometimes they'll text me and say, hey, you want to come see this movie? And I'm like, oh, I've just been reading like all these reviews about how horrible this movie is. But you know what? Let's go watch. And, there's fun to it. And just because the movie critics pan a movie doesn't mean that it doesn't bring millions of people joy. And at the same time, I've tried to bring them to some Oscar movies that I really love, and I'll go see. This is great. And I'll try and bring them, and I'll turn over, and they'll be sound asleep 20 minutes into the movie. And so it is. I think movies and storytelling absolutely have value, but they also have value to different people in different ways, and we as filmmakers especially should respect that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, I don't believe anyone sets out to make a terrible film. You know what I mean? Like, they're trying to make the best thing they can. And a lot of times you can watch something and you just get a vibe that I bet they had a lot of fun making this.
Yeah.
Right? I bet they had a lot of fun making this. It does not work for me. Right? I do not enjoy it. But it's like, I think if you just look at a film and be like, that sucks, no one should watch it, this is terrible. Like, as you said earlier, you should be able to answer the questions, right? So it should be, what precisely don't you like about this film? What doesn't work for you? And I feel when I'm, looking at films, I try and break down what works for me, what doesn't work for me, right? If I don't like something, I'll say, what I mean, these are the things that I just didn't think worked. These are the things I just didn't gravitate to. There's usually something I did enjoy, right? It might be really like the score, or this person's performance was great. And then I'll throw in some reference points, right? Like, so this doesn't work for me, but if you like this film, this film, this film, I think that could work for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's always an honest way to go about things, because just because I don't like it doesn't mean, and there's so many occasions where there's films I've gone and watched and I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, thousands of people love this. I did not I did not enjoy oh god, the Glenn Powell Sydney Sweeney film. Was it Anyone But You?
Oh, I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, didn't enjoy it. But a whole load of people did enjoy it, right? I did not like the first and second Deadpool films. Really didn't like those films. The third one was a friggin' masterpiece. The third one was great, but I didn't like the first two. And I know so many people love those films. So it's just like, what I mean? It's just one of those things. And it's always about trying to keep open, because if I did not like the first two Deadpool films, so I'm not going to go and watch the third one, I'd have missed out. You know what I mean? So it's like, by going, you know what? I'm going to give it a go. You can be like, oh, that really surprised me.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the things that's really hard in today's day and age, where there is so much content. It's so easy to, turn on your television and watch something that you know you'll like, or that you have a strong hunch that you'll like. It's one of the issues of why we have so much existing IP, and it's harder and harder for original movies to get made. And so it's I think more important than ever for us as audiences to say, hey, I know nothing about this film, or nothing about this film necessarily says that I'm going to love it, but I'm going to take a risk on it. And oftentimes there's, for whatever that reason is, And that was actually one of the really cool things in with Midas, and it did its theatrical run, and here in Hartford, it did a really nice theatrical run. It got extended for 7 weeks and kept bringing in audiences.
Nice.
And our offices are actually right around the corner, and so what I would try and do is, when I'd finish up a day's work, oftentimes that coordinated with I could walk down and happen to be there as people were walking out, and so got to have some really cool conversations with people who a lot of times they'd recognize me from, oh, I saw you did that local news interview, and that's maybe why I came to see
Yeah.
them or whatever. And I had a bunch of people who came up to me and said, if I just watched the trailer for this, I would not have come, but I saw the news interview that you did and figured, hey, why not? It's a local film. I should just go check it out. I've got nothing to do today. And I loved it, and I'm so glad I saw it, and thank you so much. And that was really cool for me, was the people, and it was, the widest range of, a nice sweet old grandmother to a really young high school kid. It was a really wide range of who it was. But people that were coming up and going, yeah, this is not something I necessarily would have watched if I didn't know that it was shot locally, but I took a chance on it and really, really enjoyed it. And that's, the harder piece of how do you continue to do that at a wider and wider scale?
Well, I think the big thing, right? And what people just said there, it was a story, right? And the story of it being a local film,
Yeah.
right? There's always a story that can gravitate to people. So it's just like, have conversations. Yeah, I mean, it's the reason, I started this, because it's just like giving people the opportunity to talk about their projects and actually talk, right? It's not a 5-10 minute little spot where you can't really say a lot. So because if people know about something, that can spark their interest, right? And if they hear the passion of the people behind it, that's always a big thing, right? Because if you're speaking so passionately about something, people are like, you know what, I might give that a look, because the way he was selling that sounds great,
Yeah.
or I like the way he talked about, this thing, or he's insight into this. And it's those things that can catch people. So I think it's like that's what you need to do, and it's always, because there is so much out there, right? We've got so many streaming platforms now. It's kind of crazy. And it does make me, I am baffled at times that people making, because you've got your big films that those platforms will push, and then you've got the smaller films which they just throw out there and
Yeah.
see, how many people they can hit with it. And it's those creators that you think, y'all should be out talking about your project, and a lot of times they're not. And I think if that's what people need to do to get those eyes on the project.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I will absolutely endorse that, as then that has been such, our rollout plan with Midas, especially at the local level, was, we made a list of all of the local publications, the newspapers, the news TV shows, the radio shows, anywhere that we could, get out and have people hear about this movie, hear the story of this movie. That was really, we made that list locally, and we went out and sent personalized emails to every single one of those outlets.
Mm.
And I think we went like pretty close to 100%, because people, the editors at these places, we put together a well-crafted email, they were interested, and so they brought us on. I just did one this morning. We had one who hadn't responded and then saw a bunch of the other stories and came back like 2 months later and like, we're so sorry we didn't see your email. We'd
Yeah.
love to have you on. And had a great conversation with them. But I think that is such an important piece of, and it's so much more valuable. We've done the Facebook ads and the other things to push it out as well, but getting to go and talk to people and say, hey, what brought you here? So many people, it was either I saw the newspaper or I saw the TV and was really interested enough to come see it, or it was a friend told me it, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else came to see it first. They called me up afterwards or sent me a text afterwards and say, hey, this is in theaters for another week. You should really go check it out. And I think that personal connection, whether it's hearing someone talk about it or having your friend recommend it to you, I think that is so much more valuable than seeing a Facebook ad that you scroll past.
Yeah, I do marketing and comms as a day job, and I do not really think paid adverts work. I don't, because there's nothing to them, and it's an ad, right?
Yeah.
So you get mad skeptical, like, why the fuck am I seeing this? Right? Why is this in my feed? What's going on here? And there's no soul to it, right? But if you hear someone talking, that's the thing that's going to connect with you. Or if you hear, as you said, a recommendation, it's like that other outlet that got back to you months later, right? It's because, firstly, sending out the emails to everyone is a great idea because you're giving them content, right? They're sitting in meetings every day going, okay, what are we going to do a story on? How are we going to, how are we going to fill these pages? How are we going to, get something. So if someone comes to them with something, right? Something with me, then they're like, oh, friggin' perfect. Yeah, let's do that. Right now, you do get people that can be a little hesitant, be like, why should? But the minute you see everyone else on board, you're like, yeah, I want a part of that. I want to, no, come here too. So, you pick people up, even if it's a bit later on, which isn't a bad thing because now you've created a new life cycle for the piece.
Yeah. And one of the things that was surprising to me, and I still don't know that I can fully explain why it happened, but when we first started, so I have the Hartford Film Company's, full-fledged company, and we had 2 paid summer interns this summer. And so one of them, when things were getting crazy in the lead up to the release and my time was stretched a lot of different ways, I gave her the task of, hey, can you, take this list and can you maybe send out some emails and try reaching out? And she didn't have a ton of luck, right? It was a slightly removed email of, hey, I'm with the team behind Midas and we think you might be interested in doing a story and talking to the director. And those, I followed up and then said, hey, I'm the director. I would love to chat with you about the movie, or I'd love to come on the show, or whatever that is. And people then were really interested. And so I think my initial instinct, it wasn't necessarily just a time thing. It was, oh, from a professionalism standpoint, you would never see Christopher Nolan emailing news publications and saying, hey, can I be on your show?
Mm.
But the kind of earnestness, the personal touch of me as the director saying, hey, I'd love to come on the show, as opposed to delegating it to somebody else to try and seem a little bit more professional, me doing the reach out worked a lot better. And again, I don't know that I can fully explain why it was, but my instinct is that when you get an email from, hey, this is the actual person, this is not someone trying to push a story who's getting paid to promote it, but I really just genuinely want to share the story and share the movie. I think that spoke to people and made them more receptive to my email.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. But also, right, sometimes it's all about the follow-up. Right? So you sending that initial email, because there's nothing wrong with that initial email, essentially. But people get bombarded with so much stuff, and it's a bit like, but so if you then get a follow-up, it tells you, these people are kind of serious.
Yeah.
Right? These people aren't just, it's not just a group message they've sent everyone, right? They're following up. They care about this thing, right? So sometimes it's just a follow-up. So whether it, like, you had sent the first email and she had followed up, it's just that follow-up message that can hook people sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely, especially at the indie level, the publicity of a film is so much just about putting in the sweat equity of, being willing to follow up shamelessly
Yeah.
and press it. And I think also doing that with, your friends. I think that's been a huge piece for us as well, is every time we have one of these milestones, I pull out my phone and I'll try and find, a couple hours where I'll just go through and go, yep, let me text this person, hey, movie's out in theaters this week. If you're stopping by, let me know. Would love to say hi. And just like sending out that text or some variation of that text to all of my personal contacts or everybody that's, appropriate within my personal contacts. I think that's such a, as a filmmaker, can feel like, but people are excited to support you as well. And so,
Oh, for sure.
somebody, oh my God, thank you so much for letting me know. I'm going to come on Tuesday night. Would love to chat with you afterwards, or whatever that is. I think that's a really cool piece, and something that, as filmmakers, we have this community that wants to support us, and just giving them the instructions. And in this case, we're now at the streaming phase, and so it's telling people, hey, rent or buy the film and leave a review. If you can leave a review, when you finish the film, take the 5 minutes and leave the review. That's so helpful for us. And people are like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's like there's a roadmap to this. When you hear Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater, like Josh Whedon, J.J. Abrams, like a load of people talk about their early films, right? It was always, they've got this group of people who have gone with them from film to film to film, right? This core team that they work with. And you know what I mean? Like they build this community. So when you're talking about the film, like you're pushing it out there to your community, and then all these people want to come see the film because they've seen you grow, they've seen you evolve, right? And I don't think anyone can really make it without that, right? You need those people. You need the people to, you know what I mean, want to lift you up. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a big thing. Just reach out to those people, send those messages, let people know, right, this is happening, because you know what I mean, if they're your people, they're gonna want to check it out, they're gonna want to support you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a thing, but it's always weird when you see that, people aren't doing this, right? The amount of times I've reached out to filmmakers and you've heard nothing, and then you hear the people going, no one wants to talk to me about my film, and it's just like, yo, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? You're trying to be selective on who you want to talk to, like the big shots, but then they don't always want to talk, and if they do have you on, they're not giving you a lot of time.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean, like, have the conversations with the people that want to have the conversations with you.
Yeah, have the conversations where you can actually, go in depth and talk about more than just the boilerplate. Tell me about the film and what's your favorite memory from it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the conversations like this, where we're getting to go more in depth and talk about the intricacies of making a film that's not just, because especially having now done a bunch of these, there's some questions that I just have a boilerplate answer for. I've been asked the same question 15 times on 15 different 5-minute segments, and I know how to get it in really tight, because I also know that I only have a limited amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for real. Yeah. So what is your favorite food?
I've been trying to master my breaded chicken. Been like, yeah, I've been I'm recently moved into a new apartment and got myself a nice new pan to really try and work on it. It's not been going so well, but I'm gonna keep working on it until I perfect it.
Oh dear, oh dear. Hey, I was really impressed with the cast of this film, man. I mean, they really did a fantastic job. And I thought the interesting thing, it seemed that they were all very early in their careers, which I thought was nice, right? So how did you come across, like, how was the casting process for you? And what was it about these people that you were just like, I'm going to take that chance, even though they don't necessarily have this big body of work? I think, and I might be wrong, but it looked like this was Victor's first feature role.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
the guy that played Victor, not
Yeah,
like,
there you go.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean,
who,
one of the so I think coming into casting, part of it was I was like, this is my first feature, and people are taking a chance on me to be in this position. And so I should not be snobby and say I'm only considering people with X amount of credits or with an agent or whatever. And
mm,
so, and we also, the other key thing, and I'm a big believer in this, is the key to casting is patience. And sometimes you can't have the patience. But in our case, we were fortunate enough where I kind of had this period. We were 3 months out, and I was like, we can take the time to really do casting right. And so we did a nationwide casting call that we posted on multiple different platforms and through multiple different outlets. That we were casting the lead 5 roles, and it was open casting. You just had to submit a self-tape audition. And for the lead 5 roles, we got over 5,000 self-tape auditions. Um, but I was like, yeah, like, let's do this. And so there was basically like a week where I watched all 5,000 of those self-tape auditions. Right. And it's a fun experience. So first of all, it's, as a writer, you're really getting to see your character come to life, and you're making some
mm,
decisions about, like, oh yeah, okay, there's the classically tall, dark, and handsome guy, or there's the, eclectic guy, and like, how do you want to see this character brought to life? Um, and some of them you get only 10 seconds in, and you're like, nope, this is not at all the character. Next.
yeah,
Um, but interestingly, I remember, actually I remember all 3, Ricky, Sunita, and Victor. I remember all 3 of their self tapes. For Ricky Laquan, I remember instantly he was not what I had pictured in my head for the character at all. But I watched his self tape, and I was like, he has the energy of Ricky D, the like raw
mm,
energy, the charisma, the confidence, but like, he just had the energy in a way that I think I kind of ranked self tapes going into callbacks, and he was the top of my list
right.
going in.
I mean, what was can you remember what your kind of initial vision for the character was?
Yeah, so initially I thought that Ricky needed to be this 6'3", suave, like really kind of cool guy, in a way that like maybe swept you off your feet more with the looks and the confidence in that way. And I mean, obviously, all of our cast are very attractive people, but Laquan kind of brought this more. He brought an excitement. He brought a kindness. He brought this energy and enthusiasm to the character that I think, um, yeah, I was kind of picturing somebody that was going to be a little bit more withdrawn and more just like play it cool,
Kind of
uh,
mysterious type of.
mysterious, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that he just brought this energy that really worked. Um, and then I remember for Sunita, played by Preet, we wrote in the character description. Uh, I think the like very last line of the character description was Hermione Granger type, and
Yeah,
she
not Hermione Granger type.
not Hermione Granger type, but she wore, for her self tape, she wore like a sweater vest. And again, that was one of those, and Preet, I think, actually, this throughout the casting process, the self tape, she wore the sweater vest, and she was good. And I kind of thought the sweater vest was funny. I think she was the only one that really wore the sweater vest, and I was like, she definitely really read into that Hermione Granger type piece. And then we got to the callback stage, so we did this first round of self-tape auditions, and then we brought them to the callbacks. And I think we had probably like 30 people for each role in the callback stage. So again, still a pretty big pool.
Yeah.
I think we did like kind of 4 or 5 hour blocks with each of them or something like that. But it was a pretty big pool to sort through. And that scene for the callbacks, I remember, was the scene towards the end of the movie, without giving too much away, where they're picking up a body.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we get on this Zoom for the callbacks, and we exchange pleasantries. And I'm like, all right, you ready to do the scene? She says, give me 1 second. And she kind of like steps off camera for a second, and I can kind of hear breathing. And then she comes back and she's out of breath, and she does the scene, and it's great. And then I give notes. I always, in a callback, even if the person nails it on the very first time, I give them something different to do because I want to see if they can take direction.
Yeah.
And so I give her a different direction to take the scene. She goes, okay. I'm like, are you ready? She gives me 1 second. She goes off screen. I hear some breathing, comes back. And finally, I think on the third time, I realized, oh, she's stepping off and doing like jumping jacks.
Yeah.
To get into this, like, oh, I'm been carrying this body and I'm out of breath. And she was the only one that did that. And everybody had the same scene. And again, it was one of those things that at first I was like, she's really trying hard here. Of like, she's done the sweater vest in the first round and she's doing jumping jacks in the second round. And then I said, if she's willing to try this hard for an audition, imagine the amount of effort she's going to put in when I give her the role, right? Because she had this great energy to her. She was a great actress. And I was like, wow, like, imagine this. And that was 100% true. She showed up. I mean, even before she showed up, like as soon as we gave her the role, the 2 days later, she called me and she had put together this whole character Bible and how she was going to build the character. And she was writing daily journal entries as the character, and she was getting into her space. And I was just so, blown away by the excitement she had for the role. And so, I think one of the pieces of advice that I've given to other filmmakers, especially filmmakers that are about to embark on their first feature, is there is oftentimes a lot of pressure of you need to try and cast some big accomplished actor. And a lot of times that's for financial reasons. And there's definitely benefits to having the name actor on your poster. But one of the things that we also found was that, we explored that a little bit. And for whatever the actor was, the money that they wanted did not line up with the added value. So it was like, oh, okay, we can get this actor for $100,000 and it will make the film $75,000 more valuable. And I was like, well, that math doesn't add up. And so we were fortunate to be able to make the film without needing to, have financial be the main decision in casting. It was just who's the best actor for this role. And we did a really thorough very thorough search process. And at the end of the whole thing, our 5 lead actors, I think, all had this hunger. Even Bob, who plays the CEO father, and he's been locally for years and years and years, and was really the kind of veteran presence on our set, which I really appreciated, because I think, I remember there was a day where we were just doing dialogue scenes, and so we were running through like maybe even 10 pages of dialogue, because it was like we were just kind of flying through all this dialogue. And one of our younger actors was kind of struggling with his lines, and Bob came over and like settled him down. First of all, just like, hey, don't worry about it, right? Because like, I think when you're an actor and you're first time starring in a movie and you're like, oh my God, I can't nail my lines, and there's all these people and all these lights and everybody's looking at me. And Bob was the veteran presence that could kind of settle him down and gave him some small tips, which I think beyond just, the tips may or may not have been helpful, but that presence of like, hey, this is fine. This happens on a movie set. Don't worry about it. And like helped reset the actor and get us, get him back on track, and everything worked out. But I think like Bob could have been the kind of actor, because Bob wasn't in that scene. Bob could have been the kind of actor that said, all right, I'm going to be in my trailer. Come get me when you need me to deliver a line.
Yeah.
And
And
he
a
was
lot of people
very
do
much,
that.
all of them were, hey, how can we help out? If you need me to be, on all the phone call scenes, one of the standards is like you just have somebody else feed them the lines at the other end of the phone call. Federico and Laquan would both say, hey, I know I'm not called today, but I've got nothing else to do. Let me know when you need me to come do the phone call scene, and I'll do the phone call scene and read him his lines because I want my fellow actor to be able to give the best performance, which means he needs me at the other end to be feeding those lines and give him the best possibility to deliver what he needs to deliver. And so I think there was just, a buy-in from our whole cast of, we're in this together. We're all hungry. We all, believe that this project can be a really, my feature debut, but also for them, some of their feature debuts, and a belief that this can kind of be a real calling card for all of us. And so a buy-in to make that happen. And that's something that I'm so grateful for. And I tell other filmmakers, hey, if you have that opportunity to work with hungry actors who through the audition and callback stage can tell they're going to give you 110% and they're going to want this movie to be great just as much as you do, that's invaluable.
Oh, you definitely need that, right? Because the thing being, right, you're the director, but if the film doesn't work, it doesn't look good for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't look good to be involved in a film that tanks, right? Or like a film can be taken down by one, just off par performance, right? You can think, like the lead actors are really good, but it's just that one person. It's such a shame because they really do affect this film. So it's just like you should want, what I mean, your other castmates to be on point to do the best they can. So yeah, if you can be on the other end of the phone, if you can be there just on the sidelines boosting people up, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And well, actually, one other funny story from the casting process was Federico, who plays Victor. He actually, I remember in his callback, there had been a mix-up with his agent, and he had gotten the wrong scene to read. And so, like, we had sent the scene out 2 days in advance. He didn't have it. And so, like, there live in the callback, I emailed him the sides, and he, like, was reading them for the very first time. And so, admittedly, and he'll probably tell you this too, it was not the best callback read because he was getting him totally cold and he was going up against 29 other actors who had been studying this part for the last 2 days and this scene for the last 2 days. But there was something about him where I was just like, I think that I could see him as part of this trio working potentially. And so I said, we're going to bring you on. I think we brought 3 or 4 actors to the final stage, which was chemistry reads, where by that point we knew that we wanted Laquan to be our Ricky. He had
Right.
kind of super impressed us. I think we narrowed it down to 2 Sanitas, but we had our Victor, like we hadn't really figured out yet. And so we had 3 actors who had really wowed us in the callback stage. And then Federico, who had kind of been thrown this curveball in the callback stage, but I could tell was a good actor. And when we put the 3 of them at the very first read of the 3 that became our 3 leads, I immediately was like, yep, I believe that they've been friends. They have this chemistry that works together. They feel natural together. And it really worked. And that was kind of what pushed it over the edge for us. And was one of those things that it was a bit of a gut decision because like we didn't want to really take 4 people for chemistry reads. The idea was we were gonna narrow it down, but I was like, I just want to have Federico there because I don't think that we got to see his very best performance, not through his own fault for the callbacks. And I think that I just have this gut instinct that it's going to work. He's going to read well with Laquan and with Preet. And that's exactly what happened. And so sometimes it is in the casting process, it's just those gut instincts where, if you had asked me, I couldn't have like articulate. If you had just asked me to rank people and things, it would not have worked. But I had this gut of like, I can feel in my gut that this might work, and I want to just bring him along.
Oh, definitely listen to your gut more, because the chemistry between them all, you definitely bought that they were good friends.
Yeah.
Right? That definitely worked. And that's like, oftentimes you'll watch a film and you'll just be like, I mean, everyone was very good, but I just didn't buy that relationship. So I thought, yeah, that was definitely a good one. I did think Preet was a standout in the film. I thought her performance was like, they were all really good. Like, everyone was just so solid. You know what I mean? Like, Eric was really good as the net. You know what I mean? Like, there was no one who was bad, but I thought her performance was really, and especially you got the scene towards the end. You know what I mean? Like, when Ricky's like, "Oh, like, come do this thing," and she's just like, "No." And it's just like that whole thing, because you bought it, because you bought the kind of like, there's that hesitation of, and she wanted her help, but it was just like, but this is just too much. And you bought all of those emotions in what she was doing, and I thought it was really great.
Yeah, no, that is one that I think our scheduling was such an important factor. So as we were building the schedule with our first AD, I said, hey, I really want to start with the office stuff. And in fact, we're going to start with a lot of the heist stuff, which he was a little concerned about, because that was the heist stuff involved the camera movements, and on the camera side was trickier. But I was like, no, I want to start there, because on the acting side, it lets our actors ease into it a little bit, because a lot of it is looking at a computer doing stuff, and it's not as much dramatic lifting.
Mm.
And so we started there, and it was in there that I kind of got a feel for how to direct them, because I think with every actor you have to learn how to direct them, right? So one of the things I remember is through the first week and a half, really making some notes and figuring out whose coverage should we shoot in what order, because we found, this actor can deliver their coverage whenever, and so like we can slot them in whenever. This actor continues to get better, and so if we're doing their coverage, it's the 15th time that we're doing that scene, that's going to be better. And some actors that you wanted to grab their coverage early, because after a while they had trouble keeping it fresh, and so there was some feeling that out. But then the other thing that was fun was, as a director, I kind of have in my mind how I want to direct things, and what coverage and what different ways of a scene I want to get. And so we would film that, and then I think it was like day 3, we were shooting actually the scene in the elevator, one of the scenes in the elevator, the very first elevator scene where the two of them get in the elevator together. And it was the first scene that like was actually a back and forth scene, and there was more subtext to be played with there. And so we shot the wide shot probably 4 or 5 times the way I wanted to shoot it. And we were like, okay, let's grab one more. And I just said, hey guys, have fun with this one. And it like the freedom to say, I'm not trying to do what the director wants me to do, but I just get to have fun here. We've got what the director wants. It opened something up for them. And so that became, we did that on just about every scene in the film, is I would get it the way I wanted things to be done. And that took 3 or 4 takes or whatever. And then I'd say, okay, one more take, have fun with it. And so many of those takes made it into the movie. And I think part of it was, I would try and walk them to where I wanted it to go. And then by opening it up, they were starting from there, but then got to bring their authenticity back into it. And so it worked perfectly. But I bring this up because I remember we intentionally had that scene. I think that scene where she says no is actually the very last scene that we shot in the movie.
Oh shit.
And I remember being, and it's a night scene, and so it's late. It's not it was a split, so it was probably around midnight, but it was later, and ran the scene a couple times and said, okay, have fun with it. And she absolutely delivered. And it was one of those things where I was like, if we had started with this, I wouldn't have gotten a feel for how to direct Preet. She wouldn't have gotten a feel for how to, give me what I wanted. And that scene wouldn't have worked. But because we started with the easy stuff, and, it's like kind of like riding a bike, you build up your confidence. By that point, we were at a point where I could just say, hey, takes 2 takes for me to get what I want. I let you have fun with it. You absolutely knock it out of the park, and it works so well.
Right. Nice. Yeah. No, that was great, man. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important thing for, directors to hear. Because I think it's like so it can be an easy thing to be beholden to your script and be like, no, it's got to be like that, no ad-libbing, none of that, right? But yeah, sometimes just give people the freedom and you might get something really special.
Yeah, and that was Eric Bloomquist, who plays Tom in the film. That was something that he on day one brought. Of this was kind of a different character than he normally plays, and he was excited by the opportunity to bring the energy of Tom to this role, and so he threw in some ad libs. And I remember the first couple times he did it, it threw me off a little bit, and then he delivered one that was so funny. In one of the office scenes, there was a line that he delivered that was totally ad-libbed, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it would be a crime for me not to get these. And so again,
Yeah.
that was one of those things where I would typically say, hey, give me the first 1 or 2 takes as written, just so that we have it and we always have something to fall back on, and you can get a feel for the scene. And then I'll give you 2 or 3 takes where you get to ad-lib and throw stuff in. And I think he had a lot of fun with it. And it also opened it up for our cast, because he was coming in doing that in some of the opening scenes that we shot. And so they got this feel for, okay, yeah, I can see how ad-libbing can really improve the scene and make it better. And there were multiple times when, I mean, even some of the most pivotal lines, again, without giving anything away, but there's a line that Claire gives after this big twist moment, and
right.
had something else written, and we tried it like that once, and it was like, oh, this isn't quite working right. And she's like, I have a idea. Can I try it out? And this feels right off my tongue. And again, once on a feature film, your actors are living with these characters for so long, and that was something different for me. I'm used to a short where you get on a good short, you get 3 days, and so your actor is just barely getting to know the character. But on a 20-day shoot, by day 15, your actor knows the character better than the writer does. And so oftentimes I could turn to the actor and go, hey, this isn't feeling right. And they go, yep, no, let's workshop this and figure out what needs to happen here.
Oh, that's good. That's great. This is a diverse cast. Was that intentional, or was it literally, as you say, with the self tapes, it was just, no, that performance works, they work together? Or was there a thought of no, like, I want these looks for the film?
So there was definitely some openness to it, in that all 3 of the lead roles were ethnically ambiguous in the casting description. And actually, the names, Victor and Sunita, were set as the character names after the characters were cast.
Right. Okay.
And that was actually one of the very first conversations that I had with both the actors. I said, hey, now that we've cast you, the names that you read for were just kind of placeholder names that were intentionally ethnically ambiguous. Let's lock in, and first part of building your character is picking a name. And both actors, it was different processes, but both actors, it was really fun to kind of go through the process of a name and what does it mean. And if you get to pick your character's name, how do you do so? But anyway, in the casting process, one of the things that was in my mind when it came to diversity, so I'm born and raised here and went to the Hartford Public Schools, and it's a little it's complicated that I don't want to go into the full story, but essentially back in the 90s, there was a court order that Hartford Public Schools were too segregated. And so this court order had racial integration where the school that I went to two different schools, two different public schools, but both public schools I went to were by court order 25% white, 35% black, 35% Latine, and 5% Asian. And like that was the world that I grew up in. And that meant that, you know, my high school friends were from all these different cultures and backgrounds. So it wasn't a necessity for me, but when we kind of had this option, and again, it really was the chemistry read. In the chemistry read, we had different combinations that were different, you know, diversities.
Yeah.
But in that chemistry read, all three of them came together, and I said, not only do they feel like they absolutely could have been high school friends, but they feel like they could have been high school friends from Hartford, because in Hartford, it is very common to have this level, and Claire too, right? Like the family, the suburban family, being white, and there being kind of a wealth gap there, but all being in these same spheres was very common. And so that was something that I kind of knew if it worked out, it would be great. And sometimes the stars align where you go, oh my God, these three actors are the perfect three actors, and they have the feel, and they kind of meet this authenticity of what it is to, you know, grow up in Hartford.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's interesting, especially the name thing. I've never come across that before. It's the first time I've heard that.
The actors, you know, because it was, I think the original character names were Jordan and Brianna. Again, trying to be names that, like, because one of the things is, you know, I know this from being friends with quite a few actors. Sometimes, you know, they'd get sent a script to do a self-tape for, and be like, all right, well, the name is clearly not me.
Yes.
And
so what's the point, right? What's the point in going for this? Yeah.
And so we're like, hey, we want this to be open. We're going to try and choose names that are as, you know, ethnically ambiguous, so that people see it and connect with the character, not necessarily the name. And so then we got to this point, okay, we have our incredible cast. And I think, if I'm remembering right, I mean, at this point, it's over 2 years ago, but as I remember it, for Sunita, the way we came to that name is we were looking at the meanings of names, of South Asian names. And Sunita, I believe, means kind of obedient to one's parents. There's some meaning behind that, of obedient to one's parents. And we thought there was just a fun irony there of her, who on the one hand is the kind of like good girl, let's keep us on track, but on the other hand, like really flies in the face of that.
Yeah.
We thought there was some fun there. And so, you know, I remember we kind of were on a Zoom call and had written down some names, and that one came up, and I think we're like, yeah, that one fits for the character. And Preet was like, that gives me so much more to work with, because, you know, this idea of, hey, my parents named me as obedient and good child, and so that backstory to play with this character as she's making these decisions and deciding to, you know, commit a felony.
Yeah.
And then for Federico, he's Colombian, and actually one of the things that I've found really cool is my neighbors are Colombian, and their kids, all of their middle names are the soccer player that their parents were really excited about the year they were born.
Oh man!
One of the kids is his middle name is James, because James Rodriguez was the World Cup breakout sensation the year he was born for Colombia.
Right.
And so I told Federico that story, and we were like, and Federico's also a huge soccer fan. And so he loved that. And so we went back and we said, okay, this character theoretically would have been born in 1994 or whatever the year was, in that World Cup. Who were the like Colombian breakout stars, and one of the stars was Victor. And we said, okay, so that's the backstory, is that his parents
Right.
were watching the World Cup that year, the year he was born, and decided to name him after the star. So again, it's fun things, but I think beyond just being a fun story, it gave the actors some ownership of their character.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, they felt like they had some ownership there, and it helped build their backstories of, I think oftentimes if you're just reading a script and, in the script, we don't meet either of the characters' parents, Victor and Sunita, we don't meet their parents at all, but it gave the actors, okay, I know my name, I've come up with the origin of my name and how it relates to my parents and what it tells me about my parents. And so that's something upon which you can build the rest of the character off of. I think that's really important.
No, definitely. Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting approach. And yeah, no, it's fun, man. I think a lot of people will probably think, actually, I might try that, right? Especially as with the casting, because as you say, it removes the barrier, right? It moves that thing where people might go, is there a point in me reading? So you get so much more talent because of that. So yeah, no, that's a really smart. Right, where did you come up with the approach?
I mean, I think it was just a natural feel thing of, I was writing and doing the sides. And again, sides is one of those things that it is such you want to find a side that helps you pick the right characters, but there's also a lot that a side that you get one piece of paper, these actually get one piece of paper and decide, hey, am I going to spend the next 30 minutes or an hour recording a self-tape, with all said and done, it takes a real amount of time. And so there's so much of, you don't want to just say, schoolboy one, because they're like, okay, that character has no importance. You got to give them a name, but then also the name. And so it was kind of just, as we were going along, I was working on these sides, or I guess I'd written the characters, and it's like, okay, I want this to be open enough that I'm not going to cut anybody out early on. And then we got to that point and I was like, okay, well, these names are so generic. I don't want generic names for the characters, so we have to refresh them. And instead of me making this decision, this is a great first conversation with our actors. So it was kind of just a feel thing throughout the process.
Yeah, no, it's a great approach, man. A great approach. Yeah, like with a lot of these kind of approaches, were a lot of the things, the way you came at this film, that you learned from the shorts, or is it some stuff that you picked up from talks from like directors you've liked, or that workshops you've been to?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of everything, in that I try and be like a sponge, and so I love listening to, the DGA podcast, where they do talks like this one, where they really go in depth and have these hour and a half long discussions about directing a film. I love those because you get so many little tidbits from directors about what their process was and all that. And so that's, a lot of it is rooted in those kinds of things. And then it's just trial and error, right? So for every success story of, hey, I tried this out and I really liked it, and I think I'm going to do it on all the rest of my films, there's also plenty of things that, I went, oh, you know what? Maybe that was a mistake. And as much as possible, trying to course correct in the midst of things, but kind of like moving along in that way. I think one of the things that I did on this, that again, I don't know exactly where it came from, but I'm very glad I did it, was halfway through our shoot on a Saturday when we were off, I called all of our lead actors, and I said, hey, what can I do as a director to better direct you for the second half of the film? And kind of had to preface it to say, you have done absolutely nothing wrong. I'm thrilled by the performance that you've given up until this point, but we're 10 days in now. are there things that I can do, even if it's a small thing of, hey, just
Yeah.
like, don't do this or don't say this. Is there anything I can do to make it easier for you to give me the great performances that you've been giving? And the one, I think most of them were kind of like, not really. But the one that I remember was Federico said, hey, there was this one scene that we did that, it was at the end of a day. And one of the things was we were very strict about, we didn't want to go past 10-hour days. And
Yeah.
there's a whole list of reasons for that. But my main reason for that is I, having worked on a lot of crews, really believe that like after a 10-hour day, your crew is tired, your cast is tired, people just aren't delivering 100%. And so we had a really hard and fast rule. We do not go past 10 hours.
Mm.
And so we had one scene with Victor that was at the end of our day, and it was just kind of rushed of, we threw up the lights as quickly as we could, and we jumped into the scene with him. And he said, being in that rushed environment, like I didn't have a chance as an actor to set myself before the scene as I normally want to, and it didn't work. And actually, that scene is one of the very few scenes that actually got cut from the film, not because of his performance, but for kind of pacing wise, it didn't work. His performance, you would never know that he felt rushed, but for pacing wise, that scene got cut. But I'm really glad that we had that conversation, because in the final week of filming, we were shooting the scene with him and Ricky having their confrontation at the trunk of the car,
Right.
which is probably his most dramatic scene. And we were scheduled to shoot it one night, and he was on, and it was an overnight shoot, which overnight shoots are really tough because you're up at 3:00 in the morning. And so it was probably 3:30 in the morning. We had an hour and a half left, which was, we had scheduled maybe 2 hours to shoot that scene. We had an hour and a half left. And I kind of looked over at him, and he was there. He hadn't shot anything. He'd just been sitting there all night waiting to do this scene. And I went over and talked to him. I said, if we try and shoot this scene right now, it's going to be rushed. We have time in our schedule tomorrow. We kind of have this buffer period that we have some hours and we can fit it in tomorrow, and it's not going to affect our schedule at all. I think we're better off waiting till tomorrow so we can give it the time that it needs. And he was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, I would much rather, the scene is so important and the most pivotal scene for my character. I would much rather have the time to do it tomorrow. And we did it the next day, and I think we did it for like 4 hours to really get it right. And it was great. And I was so glad. And again, it was one of those things that if I hadn't had the check-in with him, I would have just kind of been in like, okay, we got to do it 2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours. We can squeeze it into 1.5. No problem. Let's do it. And instead I was like, nope, I had that conversation. Let me pause for a second. And we had it built into our schedule. Like it, wasn't an issue for us, but it required me, if he hadn't said something to me a week and a half earlier and been open with me, right? Like it requires an honesty and an open dialogue. Then that wouldn't happen, and that scene wouldn't be as good as it is.
And it's taking on board the feedback as well.
Yeah.
Is, you know what I mean? Some people might have just been like, meh, I think I know better.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, man. Like, what was there anything that surprised you about yourself making this film?
So one of the things that surprised me in maybe a bad way, I realized that in all the shorts I had done, the shorts were a sprint for me. So
Yeah.
these shorts, I would be on set. I would wake up. I would spend 2 hours prepping before getting to set, going over all my notes, making sure I was 100% prepared, spend 10 hours on set, come home. If I could review some footage, do that. Like it was a sprint, and that I was burning the candle at both ends, but I was like, it's going to be 3 days. I'm going to just go 110% for 3 days and it's going to be fine. And I approached Midas like that. And after the first weekend, I made it through the first weekend. And the first weekend, I just like slept for the entire weekend. And I was like, this isn't sustainable. And so I had to adjust. And part of that was like, I had to trust of like, hey, me and our cinematographer, Mike, we've done the prep on this. We've, shot listed everything. I don't need to wake up 2 hours early to go over it again. I can trust that we did it 2 weeks ago. He knows it. I know it. Just have some faith in the team that we've built as well. And so I think that was one of the things. It was a surprise in a bad way. But I was like, oh, I can't burn the candle at both ends for 4 weeks straight, because it's gonna, impact what I can give on set and my ability to be a good director. But so I had to grow through that, and I think, I'm now in a much better place. And I haven't directed any feature-length projects since then, but I've done a number of commercials and some other things. And I think I'm now in a much better place of, I feel more confident without having to do, 2 hours of prep immediately before coming to set. I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm confident in who I am on set, and I believe in my ability to make the right decisions on set in the moment, still doing the prep and still preparing when necessary, but not over preparing as much.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And do you know what's next?
That's a good question. So we have a couple projects in development. We have a documentary project. We have 2 narrative projects. All of them are kind of simultaneously being developed and trying to get the financing. And so the hope is that we can find something to maybe shoot in 2025, shoot next year. But it is there's a lot of great momentum right now. And so it's trying to capture this momentum from Midas and the good reviews and the positive press and the excitement around it, and trying to capture that and bring that into the next project, whatever it is. And so can't give any details about what the projects are, but do have some projects and hope that at least one of them will get to shoot next year.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know, man, because yeah, no, I think this was such a solid, you know what I mean, like foot forward. It was very polished. Like you wouldn't watch it and think this is the first film from someone.
Thank you.
So it was a great job, man. So yeah, it'd be definitely looking forward to the next one. Like, are there any particular genres that you thought I'd like to do that at some point?
My big thing is I want to tell accessible stories that, people from all backgrounds can watch and enjoy, and you don't have to have a, PhD in film studies to be able to appreciate, but also stories that have a message and have something to say about the world, right? And so for me,
Yeah.
this was fun of getting to a heist film that also has lots of questions about the health insurance industry in the US and things like that. And I think so there's a lot of different avenues that I can see. At some point would love to do a sports film. I'm a big sports fan. At some point
Any
would love
particular sport?
so basketball is my last short actually was the proof of concept short for basketball film. And to go back to your earlier question of why this was the first feature, initially I thought the feature length basketball script was going to be the first feature, and I brought it around. There was some excitement around it, but the feedback I got was nobody was going to give a 20-something-year-old $3 million to make his first feature, because basketball film required seats in the stands and culminated in this big location that we would have to rent out for 2 weeks and this whole thing.
Right.
And so that got nixed, but still have that script and still would love to make that one at some point. But yeah, so there's I think genre wise, it's really for me, genre is a great entry point for audiences to find something and open themselves up to something. But for me, it's really about the story that I want to tell and the themes I want to explore. And I think there's lots of different genres that can do that.
Well, definitely looking forward to whatever it's gonna be. So yeah, cannot wait, man. Cannot wait. Right. Yeah, what's next for Midas?
So Midas is now streaming on all the different on-demand platforms, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, all those different platforms. People can rent or buy it and check it out and leave us a review. It's really helpful. And then it will come to another streaming platform, which should be announced soon, later this fall. But for at the moment, that's what it's doing, and it's really just been so great to have it out into the world and begin people's feedback. So I also encourage anybody that listens to this and or watches the movie, reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at TJ Noel Sullivan. Would love to just chat about the movie and provide any insights I can into how to make your own film.
Awesome. Are you like, are you taking this to like film schools and things like that? Talking to up and coming directors, where you were, giving them like the talk of your experience in making this film, showing the film, talking them through, certain scenes, how you approached it, how you made it, all of that jazz?
Yeah, doing some of that. Went back to my alma mater, Yale, for their film festival, and did something exactly like that. And going actually next week, we're going to Trinity College here in Hartford, our Trinity College, to do something like that. And also going to some high schools. One of the cool things, having gotten to teach some high school kids, the word spread. And so we have one of the local arts high schools is bringing us in to screen the film and do a Q&A with the kids. So I'm a big believer that, in the long-term vision and goal is to build a real film community here in Hartford. And I think an educational pipeline is key in that. And so whenever we can do these kind of talkbacks and things, I always love to do that.
Fantastic, man. No, that's really good. That's great. Like, how can people keep track of everything you're doing?
You can follow the film and follow, the next project at Hartford Film on all, social media sites. And you can also follow me personally at TJ Noel Sullivan. And again, feel free to shoot me a DM, and always happy to chat film and all things film.
Tremendous. People, the links will be on the website. So go watch the film. You definitely will not be disappointed. And go follow Hartford and TJ. Yo, one thing, right? This film reminded me of a film called Confidence. Came out in 2003. Edward Burns, Rachel Weisz, Dustin Hoffman were all in it. Morris Chestnut. So I really enjoyed that film, but I thought it had a similar vibe.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, but man, I really appreciate this, man. Thank you so much for your time, and just being open to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries, man. All right, well, all the success with Midas, and looking forward to the next one. When it's ready, please come by for another chat. Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. All right, man. You take care.
Take care.